Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon your time zone. Thank you so much for joining us in this closing plenary and the wrap up to an exceptional set of parallel panels held today. I'd like to introduce the chairs for this closing session. First, Professor Mary Claire Codiner-Sager, who is the Leverhulme Trust Visiting Professor at the University of Cambridge and the Exec Secretary of the Climate Law and Governance Initiative. And of course, Mr. Advocate Ayman Charkawi, who is Director of the Mohammed VI Foundation for Environmental Protection and their work on sustainable development. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Freedom Kai, and thanks also to Antoinette, who have together been just absolutely brilliant masters of ceremonies online for this conference. I'd like to also thank our participants and all of our volunteers who have been incredible in staying with us for this event. As you know, with online events, often people will register to attend a certain session that is particularly fascinating to them, or they will register to receive the recordings to be able to watch the sessions on a time that is easier for their time zone. And I think that this conference, like that, has done its very best to accommodate everyone joining us in person or registering to receive the videos. Indeed, you will see a set of videos going out to all 750 registrants over the next couple of days for the different sessions that have taken place. There has been extremely rich and substantive engagement, discussion, and especially presentations by brilliant speakers, which have been greatly appreciated. I'm going to ask my co-chair, Ayman Charkawi, to say a few words, and then we will immediately pass to brief presentations to give us a flavor of that substantive discussion, which have been arranged for us by some extremely hardworking students who have been serving as rapporteurs as they have engaged with their chairs to indeed identify three key messages from each of the substantive sessions, the 6 experts panels and the 2 conference-wide plenaries that have been held as part of this preparatory event for the Glasgow Climate Law and Governance Day. Ayman?
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Just to further correct one point, I'm not the director at the foundation. I'm in charge of strategic development. Apologies for wearing the mask. As you may be able to tell, I'm currently in a public space at the King's Cross station, making my way back towards Scotland to carry some of the important conversations back towards COP26. And if I may, I wanted to show you very briefly something. So I'm going to be switching my camera. All right. So on the, can you see what I'm showing? I'm just trying to show. Yes. The very back over there is the Harry Potter store, and right next to that store there is the famous platform 9 3/4. And I wanted to say a bit of an homage to that. You can also see, of course, the beautiful work that was done at the station to highlight COP26. But I wanted to connect a bit with Harry Potter, as a huge fan of that series, and say that in the same spirit that the one that must not be named was named Voldemort, we are confronted with a big challenge that we must name as climate change, and we must act, and we must do everything we can to rise to the challenge and act with action and ambition. So on that note, I would like to revert back to you, Marie-Claire. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm called to mind, I'm volunteering to talk to primary and secondary school students who had been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And as part of his presentation, he had some Lego action figures, I believe, which he managed to work into his discussion of future directions in law and engineering in a way that was absolutely brilliant. So now we have from Ayman the view of the King's Cross station as he travels toward the COP26 negotiations and all of the paraphernalia that has been made available there for us. And I thank him for that. Without further ado, I'm going to turn to our panels in order and ask if our rapporteurs would be kind enough to share with us simply a taste of some of the discussions. And I understand that we have rapporteurs online now, Naraswari, Nur Jaman, and Ming Yao from the University of Cambridge, who were in charge of rapporteuring for the welcome and opening plenary. Would one of you like to present your points?
Yes, Mary Claire, thank you for the floor. So we rapporteured for the welcome and opening plenary session, and we found out that the capacity to implement the Paris Agreement will make the difference between fostering and frustrating climate goals, like what Mary Claire said. And therefore, the implementation of climate law and governance requires an integrated, inclusive, and intersectional approach. So when it comes to integrated, the new research, teaching, and actions are essential to ensure that humanity will be able to meet the target. And since the intersection of climate change, SDG, and law is critical, as Professor Bhaskar Vira and Dr. Marcus Gehring mentioned, the green economy will rely on green contracts, structure, and investment that require the presence of green lawyer. And this integrated and interdisciplinary principle is important in public policy, as informed by Professor Diane Coyle. And it needs to be inclusive because we need to include a state and non-state actor, and the state can contribute through the nationally determined contribution, or NDC, and non-state actor can contribute to the race of zero. And to ensure the just transition, we need to make sure that the regulations cover many sectors and include the role of indigenous people and vulnerable communities, including women and children, as mentioned by Professor Christina Voigt. And the third point is immediate, because in response to the daunting climate change, it is time to start implementing the drastic core corrections. And soon, COP26 will be the moment to reflect where humanity came from and where we should go, as stated by Emily Farnworth. And going forward, it is important to put the voice of young people in the center of decision-making, as stated by Professor Stephen Troop. And this is where it is very important that we start from our university and focus on the training for the professional. Thank you, Mary Claire. Going back to you.
Thank you very much. That was brilliantly presented, and given all of the rich substantive interventions in that session, you have done an admirable task in synthesizing it to give us a taste of the flavor of the opening. I will now turn to the panel on climate ambition through trade regimes, incentivizing climate action in the EU and UK economic accords, with thanks to the Centre for European Legal Studies and the European Climate Foundation. And I wonder if our rapporteurs for that session are online and can present to us their 3 bullet points. And here I'd like to especially recognize Anna Biderman-Furiela and Apurva Satapathy from the University of Cambridge.
Thank you, Professor. Anna and I were really grateful for the opportunity. So we saw that from the panel's discussion, we saw that the WTO has a key role in implementing climate policies. Regional trade agreements have proved to be a much better way to achieve innovative climate action provisions as compared to multilateral agreements. A concern, however, remains that the exclusion of trade and investment chapters from the trade dispute settlement mechanism might create challenges in effective enforcement of the obligations under the chapters. We also saw that there might be a possibility of climate trade war due to the possible counterproductive results of a carbon border tax mechanism, including the worst one, that is withdrawal of governments from Paris Agreement. Avoidance, however, of such climate trade war can happen by implementing these mechanisms in a way that does not clash with international climate and trade regimes. It was also noted that some recent trade and investment agreements entered into by the EU seem to be less ambitious in addressing the climate change issue than the ones entered into by the EU in the past. However, they still remain to be more ambitious than the ones that UK has entered into. Finally, a key conclusion from the panel was that trade and investment policies can definitely become a part of the solution. It depends on how and what we do as our action. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, brilliant summary of a very rich and substantive debate. I was very honored to be able to sit in on that panel while some of my colleagues were sitting in on the other one. And you've done incredibly well, both of you. Second in terms of the simultaneous panels, we had, of course, a very popular conservation pathways and climate action, implementing nature-based law and policy solutions to climate change, with thanks to the Center for Energy, Environment and Natural Resources Governance, as well as pollination. And I wonder if our rapporteurs for that session are also here to help us. Nicholas Butner and Nariswari, again, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. It was very clear from the discussions during the session that there's an increasing interest from investors in nature-based solutions, and this was described as a feeding frenzy and a scramble. However, it was also noted that today the capital flows don't really match the promise of what nature has to deliver. For nature-based solutions to be effective, we need appropriate institutions, law, regulations, and governance structures. And there's currently an investor competence gap linked to policy, market, and knowledge-related issues. It's also critically important that local communities are meaningfully involved in nature-based solutions and related projects. Much work needs to be done, but we heard from the speakers about positive actions that are being taken. Costa Rica is working to implement CBD Decision 14.8. A new IFRC report provides recommendations on law and policies for climate resilience. Dominica aims to disaster-proof all aspects of public and private life. Canada's proposed clean fuel standard represents a positive contribution to biodiversity, and the Colombian Supreme Court has declared the Amazon rainforest as an entity subject of rights. Finally, we heard about how climate change is driving marine species shift and the international legal framework being largely unprepared to deal with this issue. More focus is needed on adaptation, and the view was put that in the context of the UNFCCC, there is a need to strengthen the policy discussion on the ocean climate nexus. Thanks, Professor.
Thank you very much, Nicholas and Nariswari. That was an excellent report and from a very substantive session. I had many people telling me how much they enjoyed that particular panel. We will move now to the next two of our climate law and public policy parallel panels, and in particular, climate and the wealth economy, integrating science, law, economics, and policy, with thanks to the Bennett Institute for Public Policy and the Center for International Sustainable Development Law. And I would like to call on our rapporteurs for that section, Anna Biderman-Furiela again, and also Emma Latham-Jones.
Thank you, Professor. Some of the final points, the key points that have been discussed during the panel. The first one is that if the current climate targets are to be met, the transition to a low carbon economy needs to be massive, and it needs to take place more rapidly. For that to happen, there would need to be a shift in the value of things, meaning that the composition of wealth would need to be transformed. At the same time, such transition has to be just, and no community should be left behind. Also, one of the solutions for meeting climate change targets can be found in climate change framework legislation, which, by incorporating accountability mechanisms, can guarantee its effectiveness. In addition, some of our panelists have also introduced the results of their research concerning developments in certain countries' economies in dealing with their climate change targets. It has been found that the EU should focus on reducing Poland's emissions, as it is the key for the continent to meet its targets. As a representative of the African continent, Morocco has profited from 20 years of investments in a greener economy, and it has realized that becoming both more competitive and greener is possible. In the US, it has been found by some states that acting together as a bloc is beneficial and it reduces risks. Also, the US has found that legal climate mechanisms required a well-defined vision in order to avoid failure. While in Canada, the popularity of carbon tax has sustained legislation. Finally, the significant decrease in terrorism that resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic should be seen as an opportunity for the creation of a centralized policy and local regulations for the increase of sustainability in the sector, which could lead to its faster recovery. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Anna and also, of course, your co-rapporteur. You have done a brilliant job of summarizing what was a rich and substantive and extremely broad topic. And that is a skill we actually all look for in law and policy experts. So I'm looking forward to seeing your future developments in this space. We will now, of course, turn to our rapporteurs for the session on corporate climate engagement and regulation, advancing net zero corporate, commercial, and financial law and policy, with special thanks to the Hughes Hall Center for Climate Change Engagement. And I would like to ask Nicholas Butler and Ming Yao to present on that.
Thank you, Professor. The key takeaway from this panel was that net zero can be significantly advanced through climate law and policy, recognizing that there cannot be a one-size-fits-all approach. To this end, as Dr. Emily Webster stressed, in the context of UK company law, holistic reform needs to occur with coordinated action throughout diverse areas of law. Rom Zimmerman pointed to some of these often overlooked domestic law areas, such as securities, tort, and finance law, and stressed the important need to build capacity in this area. One option to accelerate change, going back to Dr. Webster's points, could be the need for mandatory net zero transition plans. Advocate Jean Perrault-Signa also drew attention to the tension between hard and soft regulation, specifically whether self-disclosure and scrutiny requirements for companies are enough to spur corporations into action without concrete consequences. He further emphasized 3 factors that make reform in this area successful: the creation of a corporate culture, including best practices and an audience-tailored framework, both internal and external pressures on these corporations, as well as rewards for companies that comply well with benchmarks. These points were furthered by advocates Alves, Tejas-Rao, and Pedro Schilling on the balance between soft and hard laws in the context of multilateral development banks. And they emphasized how accountability mechanisms can push these banks to be more accountable to its individuals and communities affected by development projects by playing both compliance and dispute settlement roles. They also talked about the inadequacy of voluntary action alone without increased regulation in this area. And one final example of the need for these differing approaches, which was a common theme throughout the panel, can be seen in emerging markets, where the private sector initiatives there may not mirror exactly what's happening in the global north. Adwa Apia emphasized the current low participation of African commercial banks in the Green Climate Fund program, stressing that more African banks should have direct access to the Green Climate Fund through custom-made strategies that tie in with those banks' business models, as well as increased financial and readiness support to these banks. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, and an excellent summary of a rich and substantive conversation, which I was fortunately privileged to be listening in on, partly in order to cheer for this absolutely brilliant early career scholars whose abstracts had been selected to present. So I want to thank everyone involved in that panel. Finally, we had our Climate Law and Plenary Practice, Plenary, which was co-hosted by the Net Zero Lawyers Alliance, a new alliance of commercial lawyers who have come forward to start changing the direction of legal advice in this area towards a net zero world. And I would like to invite our rapporteurs, Nicholas Butner and Apurva Satapathy from the University of Cambridge, to present the brief conclusions from that.
Thank you very much. As somebody who was practicing as a commercial lawyer only 6 weeks ago, I'd say I found this session both fascinating and inspiring. Commercial lawyers can play a key role in shifting systems away from their current high carbon emitting structures, and law firms are taking positive steps in this direction. We heard about a B Corp law firm and the decision it has made to practice law differently. And the question was posed to us all, is the world better off because of your law firm? We also heard about how law firm-driven smart contracting is helping to support solar power projects by automating the insurance claim process. As the projects required to drive the energy transition are structured and financed, there are and will be, we heard, for the next 20 to 30 years, a need for commercial and finance lawyers to innovate and to solve complex problems. For example, derivatives have a significant role to play in de-risking the transition process. Existing treaties and instruments such as the Energy Charter Treaty are being revisited to see how they might be able to be leveraged to help support the move to net zero emissions. Generally, we all need to ask ourselves, how can we work with what we have and whether we are using existing frameworks to their fullest potential? Thanks, Professor.
warmest thanks to you. And it was indeed a fascinating session. I was also particularly thrilled that it was the launch of a new fireside chat series, and we already had commercial lawyers signed up for the first entire year, 1 month each, which we will be hosting together with the universities of Oxford and also the universities of Glasgow and Strathclyde, among many other partners, in order to allow both final year law students and graduate students and also junior associates to think a little bit more and hear a little bit more about potential careers in the practice of climate law. Now, in terms of the keynote speakers and awards reception, do we have a rapporteur report from that? Because it would be, we do indeed. All right then. In that case, Emma, please.
Hi, thanks, Mary Claire, for giving me the floor. So we had Dr. David Boyd and Justice Antonia Benjamin share really inspirational keynote speeches. So it started with Dr. David Boyd, and he stressed how important it is to understand climate change as a human rights crisis. He emphasized the right to a healthy environment as one of the most exciting rights-based approaches. And he reminded the audience that just a few weeks ago, the UN Human Rights Council adopted a resolution recognizing that everyone, everywhere, has a right to live in a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And he argued that human rights must be at the heart of all climate action. And so he felt that the rights-based approach is our best and maybe the only pathway to achieving the UN Sustainable Developmental Goals. And then we had the second keynote speaker, Justice Antonia Benjamin, who gave an equally arousing and inspiring speech. And he stressed the importance of climate optimism, or optimism in the climate fight. He spoke of this movement from climate change law to climate law. And today, climate law or climate is a new legal concept, a new legal object. And Justice Benjamin used the word imperialist to describe climate law as it needs to infiltrate or needs to influence all other legal disciplines. And he ended by pointing out that climate law necessitates transformation within the judiciary, and gave the examples of different remedies, judicial institutions, and different evidences that will be required. Thank you.
That was excellent. Thank you very much, Emma. Deeply appreciated. We'll now hear a report which was probably put together on fairly short order from the International Law and Policy Innovations in the Paris Agreement plenary this morning, with special thanks to the Lauderpuck Center for International Law and also the Center for International Sustainable Development Law and all of those who participated as part of the Climate Law and Governance Initiative. And I understand that for our rapporteurs, we have Nariswari and Emma.
Yes, thank you, Professor Mary Claire. So we see that the pandemic has triggered humanity to focus on systemic risk and climate crisis through international law and policy innovation. And to do so, the relevant stakeholders need to improve their legal, financial, and institutional capacity. So when it comes to legal, the transition of legal units generated under Kyoto Protocol needs to be adjusted to meet the NDC target. And it's one of the most critical negotiation issue in policy innovation. And when it comes to financial, the most important point of innovation in financial capacity is to balance self-interest and public interest. And we can do so through the financial mechanism and also facilitative or enabling mechanism. So on one side, financial mechanism include, but they are not limited to, carbon pricing, blended finance, fossil fuel subsidy elimination, and so on. And on the other side, facilitative or enabling modalities are just as important because it includes increasing information, capacity building, and behavior change need. So it also includes labeling, matchmaking, and technical assistance. And these options need to be integrated into corporate law and legal contractual agreement, as informed by Dr. Megan Bowman. And the third is when it comes to institutional, the institutions involved in policy innovations need to address the importance of balancing climate mitigation and adaptation, as strongly advocated by Ayman Cherkoui. And the financing loss and damage is also important, especially for developing countries, as well as the gender balance implementation and compliance, as informed by Professor Christina Voigt. And since environmental law is often seen as an alien to a mainstream law, as stated by Justice Antonio Benjamin, it's also important to explain the complexity and ensure that institutions can foster and protect those who are most vulnerable to climate change. That's all from us, and going back to you, Professor Marie-Claire.
Thank you very, very much. And that was an excellent summary of what was really quite a tour de force. Now, I will tell you something that my colleagues are already aware of, but maybe deserves to be highlighted here. In Climate Law and Governance Day itself, we will have some of these experts who are also, of course, advisors, senior legal advisors to different delegations in the COP26 negotiations, back to explain to us what has happened during the week. So that is going to be an extremely exciting session and with a global audience, both in person and online. And we look forward to learning how many of the points they raised have actually been addressed in the negotiations in week one and their predictions for the end of the COP. We will now have brief reports from the last two plenary panels that are synthesized with even greater ability to work under pressure that all of these brilliant students have been demonstrating publicly for over 750 registrants and doing an extremely good job of doing so. The panel on climate justice and human rights, litigating climate change and liability for loss and damage. Could Apurva and Mingyao please present on this?
Thank you, Professor. We were definitely very lucky to be a part of this panel. So the opening remarks stressed on the need for rule of law considerations for ensuring climate justice. We heard an insightful analysis of a recent decision by the German Constitutional Court, highlighting its novel embracing of global perspective in the context of the Anthropocene, not grounding it in the rights-based approach, but on unconstitutionality. There was also a discussion on the issues of causation when it comes to harms caused by climate change, specifically the difficulties in quantifying the increases in risk caused by emitters, and then attributing these increases to specific emitters, positing causal analysis and need for an attribution studies. We also heard the perspective on the meaning of climate justice in developing countries, especially Kenya, and the tendency to have a more public policy-based approach to climate action. We also learned the innovative means to addressing climate action, such as climate proofing requirements for public agencies as well as industries in Kenya. It was interesting to learn about the dynamic nature of climate litigation as it consists of various narratives and interests. It also paves the ways for innovative legal solutions to deal with climate action instead of reverting to traditional legal doctrines. We also heard a discussion on alarming shortcomings and nature of refugee law with regard to increasingly common climate disasters such as floods and landslides, suggesting the study of climate migration offers and gives a chance to tease out crucial questions such as those of categorization and choice under the 1951 Convention. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very, very much. And finally, without further ado, the session on frameworks for climate repair, governing new climate technologies and carbon negative development, with special thanks to the Center for Climate Repair at Cambridge. And I understand that as our rapporteurs, we have Anna and Nicholas.
Thank you, Professor. Climate change is a failure of governance. There's a mismatch of between risk and responsibility, and it's forcing us to take a hard look at our society. Climate repair is multidisciplinary and it's international, and it also includes repairing our economic and political institutions. The recent Shell case was noted as representing the first time that a company has really had to change its behaviour. But in that case, the court was not in a position to direct Shell as to how it should go about that task. The development of norms around net zero, driven by organisations like the Science Based Targets Initiative, may help courts in the future to go further and specify the extent to which, for example, a company can rely on removals as part of that move to net zero. A proposed methane declaration is to be presented to policy leaders in Glasgow, and in the US, we are seeing before Congress legislation, which if enacted would require US oil and gas companies to pay a fee in relation to methane emissions. Approaches such as the blender tax credit in the United States are currently targeted at the national level, and this creates significant challenges for sustainable aviation fuel standards. Finally, we're reminded to, in thinking about climate repair, think about reducing, removing, and repairing. Thanks, Professor.
Thank you very, very much, Nicholas. That is excellent. And with that, we conclude our flying overview of the conference program and the extremely exciting sessions that were held, featuring both well-known experts in the field and also, of course, early career scholars who were successful in the competition of the submitted abstracts chosen by the scientific committee to join us, and certainly contributed extraordinarily well. I'd like to especially thank all of our rapporteurs who have been with us for the entire conference, working extremely hard on these issues. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the upcoming further events that we are going to be seeing online and in person in Glasgow in the coming days, and also back here in Cambridge on the 1st of December for the final Leverhulme lecture. Thank you. I'm now going to introduce our closing keynote speaker, Professor Nico Schreiber. He has asked me not to give a long summary of his many very distinguished contributions to international law on climate change and on sustainable development more broadly over the many years of his service to our community. And I must acquiesce because he was actually my chair in the International Law Association's special commission of experts on these issues that just released its report, which I hope Nico will be referring to in his remarks. I will simply note that he is a former senator and now a member of the Council of State of the Netherlands, and also an extremely distinguished emeritus professor of the Grotius Center for International Legal Studies, a former law dean of Leiden University. So Nico, we are deeply honored that you were able to join us today, and we look forward to your brief but extremely inspiring closing remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Marie-Claire, and my congratulations to you and the other organizers for a wonderful conference. I'm also very grateful for the summing up this morning by all these brilliant young scholars, and it really raises my appetite to review certain of the panels, which I was unable to do yesterday. This morning, I noted in our morning newspapers that it is all about coal, cars, costs, and planting trees. These seem to be the four main issues of the British chairmanship for the Glasgow conference. And so we have to reduce, if not eliminate, the coal consumption. We have to make a major shift towards electric cars. We really have to live up to the Paris commitment of providing developing countries with $100 billion international financial assistance towards a sustainable economy. And fourthly, we really have to do much more work for reducing cutting trees, stimulating reforestation, and planting many more trees than we cut. And of course, that raises the question, when you see the headlines in the newspapers, what role for us? What role for international lawyers? And I do believe it is fair to say we do no longer need new grand design treaties. With the 1992 Climate Change Convention, with the Kyoto Protocol, and especially now with the 2015 Paris Agreement, we have the key legal instruments which lay down the important values, the principles of international law relating to climate law, relating to climate justice, and the goals and objectives formulated. So what we need is concrete regulatory frameworks to monitor actions at domestic level by states, by businesses, and other relevant actors. And we need better regulatory frameworks for international cooperation, in order to meet that agenda of the British chair, cars, coal, costs, and planting trees. And for that purpose, we need better emissions trading. We need carbon tax for cross-border trade flows. We need better international financing. And of course, we need much better compliance mechanisms, both at the level of incentives. Marie-Claire knows that I believe much more in a policy of carrots rather than sticks, yet we also need a much more organized system of sanctions in case states and the business sector do not comply with their obligations. Well, you kindly referred to the work of the International Law Association, and please join as a member. Also, the young people, there's a very low fee for junior members, a worldwide organization in which scholars, but also practitioners and civil servants of international organizations cooperate. We have indeed accepted, we have adopted in the past, hopefully a very helpful document laying out, outlining the major principles in the field of combating climate change, especially our New Delhi principles of international law relating to sustainable development. And just to make a big jump, in 2020, last December, despite the pandemic, we managed to have the ILA adopting a set of very detailed guidelines on sustainable use of natural resources for pursuing development, for pursuing sustainable development. And in all these documents, the New Delhi Declaration, the Kyoto Guidelines on Sustainable Natural Resource Management, we always emphasize that the concept of sustainable development has three main dimensions. If we want to foster sustainable development, we need sound macroeconomic development. That is the engine of progress, also for employment and decent labor in developing countries. Secondly, we also know that environmental conservation is the basis of sustainability. And thirdly, of course, respect for human rights as the basis of human dignity. And during this COVID-19 era, we see what the right to life means in terms of a right to human health, including a right to a healthy environment. And when I listened to the panel contributions this morning on climate justice, and we just had an excellent summary with references to the landmark judgment of the German Constitutional Court, and I could add the Urgenda case in the Netherlands, a Supreme Court judgment, but also recently a new case against Royal Dutch Shell, and the Dutch District Court of The Hague found that Shell really has to do more, has to meet also -45 if compared with December 2020 in order to contribute in a meaningful way to the achievements of the goals of the Paris Agreement. And this is, I think, a pioneering judgment because it is no longer in the relationship between citizens and the state, and now it is also citizens and the business sector. And the obligations emanating, for example, from the Ruggie principles, emanating from the climate treaties, emanating from the human rights to life, are now also transposed to the business sector. Of course, we have to wait and see what will happen in the appeal. But Robert from Kenya this morning in the panel said, well, when Parliament falls short of meeting its obligations as a legislative, when also the executive is demonstrating deficiencies, we need the judiciary as the third pillar in our rule of law state to stand up for justice. both at a domestic and at an international level. Well, I could speak for hours on this, but I have promised not to do so. I'm so happy to be part of this wonderful conference, and once again, good luck to Marie-Claire Cordonnier-Secher and to all other people in the forthcoming conference next week at Glasgow. And let's hope that we can bring some of the inspiration from the work of all of you to that important conference. And I'm really nervous to know whether there will be any chance for success. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Schriver, Nico. And we deeply, deeply appreciate your brief yet extremely substantive and challenging remarks. I think we are all hoping for a measure of success in Glasgow, despite the incredibly difficult conditions that are already being faced by those who are there, and indeed the incredibly difficult conditions that are being faced worldwide at the moment in this context. It is truly a test of our civilization, whether we can actually face these issues and solve them. And the alternative, unfortunately, is, as the scientists have recently explained again to us, unsurvivable. So thank you especially for helping us to try our very best to address these crucial concerns with everything that we have.
My pleasure.
And I will now call on, of course, our colleagues who have kindly agreed to assist us in moving toward the conclusion of this conference. And I should say that we are only a little bit delayed, and the conference will conclude at about 1 o'clock, not at 12:30 as we originally hoped, but that is quite well done for a conference of this immensity and intensity. And I would like to especially ask Dr. Deirdre Joku-Baskaite, who is hosting us in Glasgow for Climate Law and Governance Day, and also Dr. Francesco Sindico, who is hosting us at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow for the specialization course on climate law and governance, to which all of you have been invited, and also many other very fascinating events on climate law and governance in Glasgow, I should note, as the newly elected chair of the specialist group on climate change of the IUCN's World Commission on Environmental Law. So I would like to welcome both of you, and we will ask you each to give brief remarks, 5 to 8 minutes, just letting people know what some of the key points for you from this initial preparatory conference are, and especially what awaits us in Glasgow in the coming weeks, and what you hope to see happen in the conference that is coming, and in your own contributions, which are many and extremely intensive, together with your students and your colleagues. And we deeply, deeply appreciate your willingness to host us. So we will turn to you, maybe 5 or 6 minutes each, and then we will also have some final news that everyone's been waiting for, which is, of course, the awards for the best conference poster, and hopefully, if we receive news from the judges in the next few minutes, the awards for the best conference presentation / papers. Please, I think it is probably agreed already amongst you, but is Gigi or Francesco going to speak first? Francesco, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Marie-Claire. I will keep it probably even shorter than 5 minutes. It's been a long day, and we all also need to move on to other things. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the conference, but from other people I've heard it's been absolutely amazing. But I've been lucky enough to obviously hear the final remarks from Professor Nico Schreiber. So let me just start with that. I think Professor Schreiber said something very important, and that is that the overall international climate change legal framework is already there, and the Paris Agreement is there to stay. So when it comes to determining the success of COP26, one way of looking at it is that whether the negotiations on the Paris rulebook will finish or not, there are 4 or 5 specific, quite technical areas that will be of very huge importance, but probably it won't be that areas that will get the headlines on the news and so forth. So then when we think of success in Glasgow, there's another way of seeing it. This was really whether Glasgow will drive the world towards dealing with what, rightly so, Marie-Claire put in such daunting terms, you know, the challenge of a lifetime. And to be honest, we will not know on the 13th of November. But what I do know is that here in Glasgow, and behind me you can see the venue, the Armadillo and the Hydro, which is part of a huge venue where COP26 will take place. There's a huge, huge momentum build. So yesterday I was at the Conference of the Youth, which is hosted at the University of Strathclyde. There were young climate experts / scholars / activists from all over the world. And you can start feeling in the city the momentum, the enthusiasm towards something big. So I do hope that a lot of you in the virtual audience will hop up on a train, come up to Glasgow in a very safe way, and join us here in Glasgow. And when I say join us, there's so much going on. I mean, any organization, not just us, not just the Climate Law and Governance Day, but any organization is organizing so many events. It's going to be really, really amazing to just try to get as much as we can. The University of Strathclyde Centre for Environmental and Governance is really proud to have joined with the University of Glasgow and the University of Cambridge in supporting the Climate Law and Governance Day, but also, as Marie-Claire said, the specialization course that takes place on Sunday morning at the University of Strathclyde Technology and Innovation Centre. And if you are interested in the chat, I just put all the information about these events, but also all the other events that the Strathclyde Centre for Environmental Law and Governance is organizing over the next 2 weeks. So I hope to see you at one of these. The two last things I want to say is that the first, as Marie-Claire said, and thank you very much for that, Marie-Claire, I have been appointed chair together with Fabiano de Andrea Correa of the IUCN World Commission Environmental Law Climate Change Law Specialist Group. I am following some very important and illustrious footsteps in the name of Christina Voigt. I'm delighted to work with her. She obviously is going to be the chair of the World Commission on Environmental Law. And I do welcome anybody in this call, in this meeting, who will happen to be in Glasgow, to find me at the Blue Zone, to find me at one of the events and discuss with me whether they are in any way interested to join the specialist group and what that would mean. So please do come and talk to me when you are in Glasgow. And then the last thing is that on Saturday the 5th, I think, or the 6th, Saturday the 6th, I am delighted to share again that the Strathclyde Centre for Environmental Law and Governance will be launching, together with the National University of Singapore and the University of Geneva, the Climate Change Litigation Initiative. And it's been years in the making, building on a book, very practical oriented. We're going to showcase our webpage. And I look forward to engaging also on that front with many of you. I'll give the floor to Gigi, but I really hope to see many of you in the beautiful space behind me at COP26 and to work together in making COP26 a success. Thank you very much, Marie-Claire.
Thank you. And thank you especially, Francesco, for your unfailing partnership, your hospitality, your kindness with so many things that you had on your plate. You've still been there, often at 3 or 4 in the morning. I've seen the times of those emails, helping to make as much as we can of Glasgow for our community and our broader circles, and as such also for our planet. Dr. Gigi, could you please go ahead as well?
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to say a few inviting words to everyone. I'm really honored to be here. It's been an amazing conference. I have learned a lot, and I have been learning a lot over the last couple of months. So in a way, Francesco has already conveyed the feeling that I wanted to convey with my intervention, which is that of huge anticipation and excitement that is in the air already in Glasgow. So it's been raining a lot the last couple of days, and the roads are flooded, and in a way it's very telling of the sort of topic we will be talking about over the next 2 weeks. But by and large, I think that the essential thing is that people are excited and asking a lot about what exactly is going to happen and in the next couple of weeks. So I have been receiving a lot of questions from colleagues, from just random people. There's definitely a momentum that has been building, and in a way, I think this is definitely the power of COP that we are witnessing in Glasgow at the moment, where people who have never talked so openly about climate change are now talking about it, and they are increasingly sort of coming on board with this topic and with asking the question of what can I do. So I think in a way we have already, at least from the perspective of us here at Glasgow, COP has already done so much in terms of mobilizing and in terms of putting in place new initiatives and new partnerships. And for that, I am very grateful, and I'm really grateful to University of Strathclyde and University of Cambridge for inviting us to join this partnership and to learn from all of you about how to help implement Paris Agreement more on the ground and through academic endeavors. So with that in mind, then, and I'm very happy then to have us honored to invite you all to a Climate Law and Governance Initiative that will take place at the University of Glasgow on the 5th of November. So we are organizing it here at the University of Glasgow at the Glasgow Centre of International Law and Security, together with my colleagues Henry Lovett, Christian Tams, and Susie Stullinger. And on the other hand, the big part of the job for all of this has been done by the Climate Law and Governance Initiative at the University of Cambridge, but also University of Strathclyde. So I do feel like they're probably the best place to introduce the program. However, I would like to say an enormous thanks to all the people who offered to put together a session for this day. And we have a total of 16 parallel sessions that will be taking place on the day. The breadth of the topics is as impressive as the topics are important. And I will not go into details about all of these topics because the program is available online for everyone to see. So I will actually just leave it at that. Thank you so much again for having us on board. I really hope to meet a lot of you who are at this conference in person in Glasgow in the next couple of weeks. And we very much look forward to seeing you all here.
Thank you very, very much as well. And we have a final announcement to make, quite possibly two, which is, of course, the announcement of the judges who have served by carefully vetting each panel. And of course, just like our rapporteurs who did so incredibly well on tight timing, they have been assisting us by watching each of the different panels and assessing the abstracts of the selected abstracts winners that have been selected to present on the different panels as early career scholars. And so I have just been informed that Dr. Alexandra Harrington, who has been coordinating the judges, unfortunately is unable to join us on this session. Fortunately, my co-chair, Ayman Cherkaoui, for whom none of these students are indeed his students, has been kind enough to step in. And he has gone through the reports that he's received from the different panelists. And I think Marcus Gehring, you may need to quickly WhatsApp him your report. And he is kind enough to at least let us know who was the winner of the medal for the posters that were submitted for this conference, and also hopefully who are the winners of the 3 medals and 3 judges' commendations for the papers and presentations that were given by the early career scholars for this conference, which is a wonderful way to conclude a very intense first conference event in a series of many different climate law and governance programmed events that will be taking place around the UK presidency COP. So I'm going to ask if Advocate Ayman Cherkaoui, my co-chair, can join me online, and the camera can shift to him. And if he could first inform us, with all due pomp and circumstance, of the winner of the posters competition, who I understand is actually watching us online at the moment, despite it being a very difficult time of day. And if not, we'll certainly be seeing us later when the recordings and videos are reviewed. Ayman, would you like to shift on your camera, or shall we go with your voice? I'm worried that because he was contacting us from King's
Sorry,
Cross, he might
no,
not.
apologies. I need another minute or so to compile some of the data I've received. Apologies, I'm not in a position to make the announcement just yet. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I think there are other judges who are here online who could probably give the announcement of the poster winner. And I understand, for example, that Professor Marcus Gehring is here with us, and he is one of our judges. And I wonder if, Marcus, you have the name of the poster competition winner and could let us know. And Freedom Kai, if you could also show us her medal that she has just won. And Marcus, I think you may need to check your WhatsApp for that name.
Thank you very much, Marie-Claire. So we should make this relatively quick. The commendation goes to Eva Balunova from the Institute of State and Law of the Czech Academy of Sciences. And the poster winner with a strong endorsement also by Lord Conrath goes to Nessam Hassan from the University of Waterloo on climate governance and urban water management in the Middle East and North Africa. Warmest congratulations from all the judges.
Thank you very, very much, Marcus, for stepping in at the last minute. It's deeply appreciated. And congratulations especially to Nesma Hassan of the University of Waterloo, whose poster on climate governance and urban water management in the Middle East and North Africa has won the poster competition for early career scholars in this conference. I should also note, and again with sincere congratulations, that the winners of the best video were announced yesterday, and that we are deeply honored and very, very pleased that we had such terrific videos that the judges had a very hard time choosing from among you, and that we have our two medalists from there. So what I will do quickly, if it is helpful, is to simply summarize the events to come as part of this program. There are only 5 that I will highlight here, and then turn back to Ayman, who is just going through the last few judging assessments that have been received from the panels you just saw, yeah? and we will come back to Ayman to make the very last concluding announcement of this conference actually be the announcement of the winners from the early career scholars who have given so much in order to be with us. So I will I ask then if you also would like to notice which events we are meant to be inviting you to, which Gigi and Francesco have quite kindly referred to in their closing remarks. The most important ones that we can highlight are, of course, after this conference, we will be putting together, as is normal, conclusion of the proceedings, and we will also be, of course, putting together a brief presentation of some of the key messages. That will be brought forward to Climate Law and Governance Day, which is a global symposium being held in the beautiful Kelvin Gallery of the University of Glasgow, together with the co-hosting UK Climate Law and Governance Initiative partners, the University of Cambridge and the University of Strathclyde. And it will consist of 16 different substantive sessions organized by, in many cases, consortia of international partners who have come forward in an open call for partners and sessions over the last year since the COP was announced, and have offered to host special sessions during the day. So 4 parallel sets of events, coupled by and with a chapeau of not only an opening and a closing plenary and a very beautiful reception to celebrate the victory in the UN Human Rights Commission of the recognition of the right to a clean and healthy environment, but also 3 substantive plenary events. One that will look especially at the international practice of climate law worldwide with the General Counsel and Directors of Legal Affairs of various different international organizations. One that will look especially at the commercial and private law elements of climate change and climate law and governance worldwide. and one that, as I said earlier, will actually feature some of our colleagues who are negotiators who are joining us to tell us how the first week is going and whether there will be indeed any elements of compromise at the consensus level among our world leaders just down the road in the COP26 in a negotiating climate change progress final concluding plenary. So we're looking forward to that particular very intense, very active, quite engaging day. There will be, as is traditional for Climate Law and Governance Day, a special set of announcements and launches being held during the lunch to recognize the work that has been done by our colleagues over the coming weeks and over the last years since Climate Law and Governance Initiative, and indeed the day itself was first piloted in 2005 in the Montreal COP, just as the Kyoto Protocol at that time was entering into force. I should also invite you the day after Climate Law and Governance Day. The initiative has been, through several of our partners who came together, been awarded a Blue Zone official UNFCCC COP26 side event on net zero climate law and governance, advancing ambition and action for the Paris Agreement, nationally determined contributions and national adaptation plans for the Sustainable Development Goals. So that session will be held in the Clyde Auditorium from 11:30 to 12:45 inside the Blue Zone, and will deliver, among other very important features, the results of Climate Law and Governance Day and the results of this conference, including a celebration of the winners of the various awards, to the actual COP negotiators and others who are in attendance. Further, of course, as Francesco has already underlined, we will be hosting both online and in person the usual Climate Law and Governance specialization course on Sunday in the beautiful modern facilities of the University of Strathclyde. And we will be awarding certificates for that training that is open to not just junior associates and junior negotiators from different delegations, but also any students or others who would like a one-day full-on participatory, engaging, networking, and training opportunity on the Paris Agreement and its implementation. And then finally, an online public distinguished experts dialogue and Leverhulme lecture on accelerating climate law and governance, courage, contributions, and compliance for sustainability, which builds on the work of many of our colleagues, which will be actually shared today in a special roundtable that is being held for the authors of chapters in the new Routledge Handbook on Climate Law and Governance. This actual roundtable will, of course, be brought forward to Climate Law and Governance Day and will be part of the, in terms of the book itself that is being written by many of the speakers who have been here in this conference today. It will be shared during the official side event as well. But where we will really hear about the outcomes and analysis of the results of the COP26 will be at this online Distinguished Experts Dialogue and Leverhulme lecture hosted by the Vice Chancellor of the University of Cambridge, Stephen Toop, who quite fittingly opened this conference on the 1st of December 2021. It's a Wednesday evening. We hope very much you will be able to join us for that concluding Leverhulme lecture. We have a group of about 6,000 law and policy experts, officials, students, and others who have been registering rather steadily for these large online lectures. And we very much hope that all of you who have joined us today and all of you who have registered to receive the videos of the different sessions and the conference results will be among the group that joins us online to analyze the outcomes of the COP26 and to speak about the role of universities and indeed all other law and governance actors in carrying forward the commitments that have been made in the Paris Agreement and in COP26 going forward into the incredibly intense work that is needed. So that is my brief announcement that was meant to conclude this conference. I think we are now going to go back to my co-chair, Ayman, to announce the 3 winners of the medals for this conference, and also to announce the 3 judges' commendations, not in that order, and then to be able to tell us as well what his wishes are for us as he travels to Glasgow to take part in the negotiations. Ayman.
Thank you very much. So I tried to find a bit of a setting in King's Cross that is of relevance, so you can see the beautiful COP26 logo. So on behalf of all the judges that took part in this important conference, the first point of note is, of course, that all the presentations and papers that were presented were of particularly high standard, and the judges were keen to express their fond appreciation for all the elements that were raised in the various papers. So without further ado, on behalf of the judges, I will be announcing the 3 commendations. First, Avoidance of a Climate Trade War by Dr. Alessandra Lemon of the Brazilian Bar Association. Second, Zero Carbon Tourism through Law and Policy Frameworks for Building Global Tourism Back Better by Sarah Norton, Cassandra Hayward, and Claire Chula from the Basili School of International Affairs. Third, in no particular order for the 3 recommendations, International Space Law, Climate Change, and the Politics of Common Concern by Advocate Tejas Rao of CSTR, University of Cambridge. Regarding the 3 medals, they would go to Article 2.1c and the Climate Finance Revolution by Dr. Megan Bowman from KCL Climate Law and Governance Center. Accountability Mechanisms in Climate Change Framework Legislation by Dr. Alina Aveshkenkova, Dr. Joanna Setzer, and Advocate Catherine Hyam from the London School of Economics Grantham Research Institute for Climate Change and the Environment. And the 3rd medal would go to Governance for Forest-Based Biofuel Production and Modalities for Enhanced Biodiversity Conservation by Advocate Freedom K. Phillips from the University of Cambridge. Congratulations to all for the excellent scholarship.
Freedom is looking extremely surprised there. And I'm so glad that I was not involved in judging any of these and literally was simply waiting for the results. Thank you, Ayman. We have one of our winners who is holding his own medal, which is good to see. And I want to especially thank everyone who made excellent presentations throughout the entire conference. You're all, of course, actually winners. I heard from all of the judges that it was incredibly difficult to choose between the presentations. We are deeply, deeply appreciative that you did indeed manage to do so. And I would like to again thank by name Lord Robert Carnwath, Dr. Alexandra Harrington, Dr. David Boyd, Dr. Marcus Gehring, Dr. Gigi Jokubauskaite, who is here with us as well, Dr. John Barker, Advocate Ayman Chikawi himself, and also the insights that were provided by Dr. Ron Zimmerman and by Emily Farnworth. We really appreciate your service in making these tough choices for us. And we'd like to especially congratulate the winners of the judges' commendations and also the winners of the medals themselves. You worked extremely hard for many long hours on many aspects of making this conference a success. And your presentations showed that you can do so while also achieving quite incredible results on your own academic work. So congratulations to all of you and thank you. With that, I am deeply honored to conclude this initial preparatory event, and I look forward to seeing hopefully all of you online or in person in Glasgow at Climate Law and Governance Day itself, the Global Symposium on Climate Law and Governance, which is taking place in the University of Glasgow, together with Strathclyde and Cambridge, and all of the partners, not the least the Centre for International Sustainable Development Law, that has been deeply, deeply honored to co-host this conference with all of our partners. We look forward especially to seeing you there and to seeing you in the upcoming work to implement this massive and incredibly world-changing, important agenda. Thanks to my co-chair, Ayman. I would like to give you the last word in the most obviously perfect example of a preparatory conference on the way to Glasgow.
Thank you. Well, I don't think I have much else to add other than it was such a great work to get ourselves started and inspired for the important work that needs to take place in Glasgow. We very much look forward to seeing you, whether it is physically or digitally, all of you that participated in today's event and yesterday's session as well, in the series of activities that Marie-Claire identified earlier. And we are deeply appreciative of all the partners that are supporting the work that took place over the last 2 days in Cambridge, but what is also going to be taking place in Glasgow over the next few weeks. Thank you very much for everyone. Deep appreciation to all the volunteers, professors that were absolutely marvelous by their ability to synthesize very complex issues in a very short bullet points, and particular appreciation, of course, to our keynote speakers, including today, Professor Nico Schriver, and the 2 closing speakers. We look forward to seeing you in Glasgow very soon, Gordon. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to ask everyone to turn on their videos, and we're going to put everybody onto gallery view and take a closing screenshot of the conference. Normally we would have all gone outside to the beautiful college gardens of Cambridge, and we would have been able to take a conference closing there. But in the absence of that, we're going to ask if Freedom Kai can put us all onto one large screenshot, and we will be able to have a conference photo that can go into the front cover of the report. And thanks again, especially as Ayman has said, to all of our volunteers who have been there. Freedom, can you find a way to put us all onto a gallery view? And this may be just my technical inability. We may all be seeing a gallery view and I just don't know it. So Professor Nico Shriver, Dr. Gigi, Dr. Antoinette, Dr. Gehring, all of the volunteers who are here with us as our rapporteurs and our hosts and our Zoom moderators, and especially my co-chair. Congratulations on a very successful conference under very difficult conditions. If this is what we have to look forward to in terms of the capacity that is being attracted to this area, there is hope for us yet. Thank you.